My first video will be about taking a trip to Sierra Leone, viewed through the lens of someone like me who may be hesitant or risk averse, but wants to take the plunge with a fair amount of safety, comfort, and predictability. So I thought it was worth it to spend some time thinking about why visiting Sierra Leone is meaningful, important, and specifically relevant right now. Let's start with the fact that you'll immerse yourself into a unique and beautiful coastal country with pretty vast and diverse topography. Literally named Sierra Leone for the line mountains that adorn the coasts, Freetown has the largest natural harbor in Africa and a unique topography that was described as striking by European explorers. Better described as majestic, but your immersion is pretty much immediate upon landing because you're forced to cross a major river, either by ferry or speedboat, where you'll immediately see the country as people saw it throughout history, from the sea. Sierra Leone is also home to the most beautiful beaches in Africa, with Number 2 Beach and Toke Beach being the most well known, but there are also much more accessible beaches and experiences, such as Lumley Beach, which is a frequent destination for local soccer games on the weekends, and a walk from mostly any part of Freetown. Whether you're looking for views, tranquility, hill adventures, hustle and bustle, or commercial adventures, Sierra Leone likely has something for you along its coasts. Let's also talk about the cross-cultural relevance of Sierra Leone if you're trying to draw connections to Africa. You see, Freetown, Sierra Leone is a major trading port. A lot of goods and trade made its way through. Unfortunately, its strategic positioning also meant it was prominently used for slaves, who can trace the start of their Middle Passage journey to Bunce Island, a slave castle off the coast of Sierra Leone that still stands as a historical site today. Freetown was also the capital of British West Africa, and thus the location of the colonial government in Flower Bay College, then called the Athens of West Africa. Africans in other parts of Africa ended up frequenting the infrastructure built up in Freetown for education, training, and politics. Sierra Leone ultimately became a place where people from all parts of Africa came together, which was unique at the time and helped in the development of a pan-African identity. While a lot has changed, Freetown is still home to an interesting mix of ethnic groups in Africa. The Mendi and Temne, also found in Guinea and Liberia, the Fulani, a group found across Africa and known locally as the Fula, and the Creole, descendants of slaves and liberated Africans. Given their unique history, the Creole create connections to both the West and other countries in Africa, including Nigeria, Congo, and Akan, which is present-day Ghana. There are actually traditional Nigerian and Congolese villages found on the outskirts of Freetown, known as the suburban area. One other result of this is Sierra Leone's unique religious diversity and acceptance, with high tolerance for Christianity, Islam, and traditional religions alike. You'll also find food and the language in Sierra Leone, known as Creole, has some distinct elements, but also has elements that clearly trace to other countries in West and Central Africa. For a small country, Sierra Leone also has a high number of people who emigrated elsewhere, especially to the West. With all this in mind, one researcher, Amadou Jackie Kaba, called Sierra Leone a historical, cultural capital of Pan-Africanism. I personally think that's true and think it's a great reason to visit Sierra Leone in 2022. Next, let's talk about Sierra Leone's combination of properties that I think make for a good environment for growth. Like most African countries, Sierra Leone is relatively young, receiving its independence from Britain in 1961 and having an extremely young populace with a median age of 18.5 years. Apart from being a young country, Sierra Leone is barely 20 years out of a civil war that wrecked its political, educational, and economic infrastructure, as well as traumatizing its populace. To add insult to injury, Ebola then brought more pain to Sierra Leone in 2014, bringing the economy to a crawl. Unlike some other countries, Sierra Leone also only got fiber optic internet in 2012, brought online by the ACE project, which also brought along with it some other smaller countries in West Africa. As a result, Sierra Leone is also very digitally young, with only 10% of its population on the internet. Surprisingly, however, Sierra Leone still has quite a lot of technology-forward activity, given everything it's gone through. Its recent administration and health leaders have shown willingness to take bets on new technologies. At the end of the day, Sierra Leone is often forgotten, but has a lot of need, mixed with a lot of opportunity, resilience, and willingness to take risks that make it an underdog worth betting on. A final and highly compelling reason to visit Sierra Leone is that your trip to Sierra Leone does not need to stop at a visit. Regardless of the number of generations away you are from Sierra Leonean ancestry, being able to trace your lineage to Sierra Leone will mean that you can enter the process to acquire Sierra Leonean national citizenship through ancestral DNA tests or other proof. If you want to contribute, starting with tourism is a great way to drive some initial economy in Sierra Leone, but once you fall in love, you can stay if you want, and there's a path to making that happen and making it a long-term second or even sole home. All right, y'all, let's talk about it. Your first trip, what are the initial steps you need to take? The first of the things you want to think about are some of the legal and financial dependencies that you'll want to get ahead of. First, of course, you have to make sure you have a passport that is not expiring anytime soon. For Sierra Leone, you need a passport that has at least 6 months left on its expiration. You also may want to consider enrolling in your embassy's program for nationals who are visiting Sierra Leone. Between the US and Sierra Leone, there's a program called STEP. Next, think about travel insurance. You may get workplace insurance for this. This is not only important so that you have insurance for losses and flight issues, but also so you have health insurance when you're local in the country. A common insurer is called Gateway and is a fairly affordable option compared to others, and they offer decently affordable prices. You also may contact your bank, let them know that you're going to Sierra Leone during X period. Sierra Leone can be frequently flagged if you're using a bank card from, say, the US or the UK, and so you want to go ahead and get ahead of that early. You also want to make sure that you order a credit or debit card that you'll need to use while you're in the country, and also start thinking about how you'll handle money transfer. forward. Finally, you will want to make sure that you're financially prepared, which will include thinking about what credit or debit card will you use while in the country, how you handle money transfers, and also how much cash can you take with you whenever you bring cash to Sierra Leone. Important to note is that it'll need to be US dollars that have that blue strip from the most recent series. If you bring a US dollar that does not have that blue strip, nobody will agree to accept or convert it into Leones. And then perhaps most importantly is making sure that you have a visa, which means you need to early on go ahead and submit the visa application. There are possibilities to get rush visas, but they can become pretty hefty in terms of fees you need to pay. Next, let's talk about planning your trip at a high level. How do you decide some of the key decisions early on that will define your trip? The first thing you want to think about is when you want to travel. As you think about that, you'll want to keep in mind that when you travel, need to consider two major things. The one is the season. You want to make sure you're not traveling during the rainy season, especially on your first trip to Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is known for really heavy and unique rain, so being there in the rain season would be not the best experience. And also a lot of things are just different because people are staying inside. The second thing we think about is holidays. Depending on whether or not you want Sierra Leone to be more or less crowded, going at Christmas or Independence Day are generally going to be very different experiences than going in the middle of, say, March or February. And so making sure you thought intentionally about what you prefer will help you decide the right time to go. When you're flying to Sierra Leone, my best advice is to use Google Flights to book a flight. You're going to have a combination of options of airlines. I personally, coming from the US, tend to use France. Some of the cheaper airlines like Royal Air Maroc are also there, but are not known for providing best service, especially to people flying to smaller West African countries. So something to consider. Next, you want to think about getting to Freetown. Lunge is located, as mentioned earlier, across the Sierra Leone River, essentially along the ocean in a town called Lunge. Most people will ferry across using one of two speedboats, Seacoach or Seabird. There's also a traditional large ferry that takes cars across as well as people. You might get seated on that ferry, but you also might have to stand up and just hold the side of the boat. And there's also the option of taking a much long drive all the way through the mainland of Freetown, crossing through places like Port Loco to get to Freetown by land. It is possible now. It's about a 3-hour drive after highway has now been fully paved, but definitely kind of an arduous experience unless you are very against taking a quick speedboat across the water. Most people do indeed choose that speedboat option with your Seacoach or Seabird. Next, you want to think about choosing a travel agency guide. The two major travel agencies you'll hear about are Visit Sierra Leone and IPC Travel. Visit Sierra Leone has a much larger suite of services and a bit of a better digital presence. IPC Travel is a lot less digitally present, but has a bit more of a kind of personalized service. If you have very specific questions or needs, you can actually pay IPC Travel. If you use them even just to book a hotel, you can pay them to have someone meet you at the airport. So even if you don't need a full suite of services like a driver, you at least can have someone at the airport just to have a quick chat with you and make sure you're good to go and not landing no one. Next, you want to think about lodging options. And here there's kind of two things to consider. One is that some people do, given the fact that they have to cross the water, spend a night in Lunge. This is perhaps most helpful if you have a late flight or are coming on a really small flight. Here's why. If you're coming on a really small flight, you might end up going on a speedboat that is one of the smaller speedboats, whereas you're coming in on a larger flight, you'll end up on a nice, much larger speedboat. Almost all of the speedboats are covered, to my understanding. If you ever see one that's not covered, I would probably skip out on that one. But being on a larger speedboat is just a better experience. And so if you're coming on a small flight, it's a consideration that you may want to wait until morning when there's kind of a larger incoming flight to Sierra Leone. If that's the case, you'll want to consider booking lodging in Lunge. There are a couple of options. There are, I believe, 1 or 2 Airbnbs. Then there is a major Lunge International Airport. And then there are some resorts. Probably the most notable is Tariq's Resort, which is a pretty nice resort like one you may see Caribbean that has a generator, air conditioning, and is relatively recently built. Still, not the lap of luxury, but you will have a generally good experience there. Next, you want to think about how you'll book lodging inside Freetown. Again, there are lots of options here, from international hotels like Radisson that are right along Lumley to resorts to Airbnbs. Generally, what people are surprised by is that if you stay at a larger hotel or resort, prices are targeted for tourists, and so they'll resemble prices you may see in small city hotels, US or UK. However, if you look at Airbnbs, you can find rates that are much cheaper, or if you're staying for a longer time, you can actually rent a house and get rates that are significantly cheaper as well. Something to consider if you are doing the Airbnb or rental route is making sure that the place you are going to has consistent power and is serviced by at least one of the major mobile internet providers. So if you are unfamiliar with Sierra Leone, there are sometimes power generation shortages, and so having consistent power usually means having either solar or a generator. So if you're going to any hotel or Airbnb that's not extremely large, you'll want to actually call and confirm whether or not they have power generation on site, and if not, what options are. If so, how often they turn on the generators. So some people have a generator but won't turn it on a daily basis or in the middle of the day when they expect people to be out. The next thing you want to think about is doing some logistical preparation. We talked about power a bit just now, but communications is kind of a larger thing you'll want to plan for. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you can have a phone you can use while you're in Sierra Leone. The big thing you'll need to make sure here is that you have a phone that is unlocked. I actually usually will end up taking 2 phones, one phone that is an older unlocked phone, which I'll use to put in SIM, and I'll also keep my phone that I would use at home, and I hook it with a travel pass. I happen to be on Verizon, and so Verizon has a travel pass. It's really expensive, but it's good in case of emergencies or if your second phone is not working. So in a case, for instance, if you got off the airport and not get Wi-Fi off your plane, you can take out your American or European, wherever you're from, phone, flip on travel pass, and pay, I think it's something like $10 for that day to have at have access to unlimited internet a day, even though you're in another country. As mentioned, you also want to confirm there's a generator at your lodging. Next, if you're not going to have Wi-Fi provided, you will want to think about getting a Wi-Fi. There are a couple of options, OrangeCell and QCell, I think are the big ones for Wi-Fi. And so having one of those ordered to your place of residence would be the best idea if you will not have internet. You'll also just want to make sure that you are in contact with a hotel host and have an actual person you can speak to before you arrive to ask things like getting keys or where certain things are located. Given time delays during your flight, you don't want to be heading to Sierra Leone and realize that you're missing a detail. So just a good preparation tactic. Then finally, you'll want to make sure you confirmed your booking with the ferry or speedboat. Usually they will either give you a ticket in advance or tell you where and when to pick up your ticket. Next, thinking about health, this is also something you want to prepare for decently in advance. You are going to need some vaccines. You'll likely need the COVID vaccine as well as the yellow fever vaccine as a requirement. You'll also need to make sure that you get any vaccines that you feel are relevant to your trip. So I think the CDC recommends hepatitis, tetanus, rabies if you're doing any particularly dangerous exploration, and a couple of other less common ones, and then ones that you may have gotten as a kid. So just take a look at the CDC recommendations and look into those vaccines early. You'll also want to make sure you have any prescriptions you need filled before you go to Sierra Leone. It'd be hard to find certain medicines there. When you're getting your vaccines, also make sure you ask about malaria medication so that you have medication with you and can start taking it. I believe it's 6 days before you travel and then a week after you arrive back. When you get your yellow fever vaccine, you also get a little card, you'll need that on you. So make sure you actually, if you got a vaccine a long time ago, still have access to that. And finally, you want to think about COVID testing, assuming you're traveling at some point near the creation of this video. COVID testing, both pre-departure and on landing, are pretty important. Now let's talk a bit about what you should bring. The first section of things to consider is essentially travel preparedness items. You of course want to make sure you have your passport and visa. Also smart to keep a copy of your passport on you as well. Next, you want to think about actually making sure a printed copy of that pre-travel COVID test, as well as that yellow fever card on your checklist. You also want to make sure that you have that bank card we talked about before and those US dollars in whatever bag you are with. If you're traveling back to a country that requires testing before departing to that country, it's also a decent idea to take with you one of the telemedicine eligible COVID tests. One of them that's used off in the US is the Binax COVID EG test. This is a test that is actually a step up from the normal Binax test, where you can actually get on a video with a doctor and have them watch you self-administer a COVID test that counts fully towards your pre-departure test. Just to note, it is different than the Binax test you may find at a local pharmacy. You usually do order this, but it comes with 2 days shipping. Next, for your personal bag, a couple of things you want to make sure you have. A lot of people like the idea of a travel neck strap or a waist bag where you can keep valuables, key, your passport, etc. as you're around. You also want to make sure you pack any of that medication in that bag as well. Power banks are also really important. I would recommend take 3. If you're ever out and about for the day and you're out of power, you don't want out searching for a place to plug in, especially given that to plug in, you'll probably adapter. You also want to think about making sure that you lock your luggage. So I recommend standard luggage lock as well as a bicycle lock, a cable lock, just for handling in cases you need to lock your bag. Having a life jacket can also be useful if you're spending any time along the rivers and don't know how to swim. It's a good idea to just have a life jacket. Also remember, you're taking a ferry across the water. They do have life jackets on boats, but some extra comfort from just having your life jacket too. Finally, having a flashlight and then backup clothes and snacks are nice. Typical travel in Africa stuff to consider. Finally, let's talk about daily living needs. You certainly are going to need some clothing and toiletries and the adapter that is necessary to convert power from whatever your place of home residence is to the Sierra Leone power plugs and voltage. So make sure you have one of those. Many of them are available on Amazon. You also will likely want to have some kind of hand or neck fan. It helps a lot if you're coming during the hot months, which are likely to be when you're coming in the rains. You'll also want to think about just making sure you have any of that health stuff on you as well. Thermometer, masks, sanitizers, pain medicine, motion sickness pills. These are all useful at various times of your journey, and it's easier to just bring them with you as opposed to trying to find a ride. If you have allergies, I'd also recommend you go ahead and bring your Epion or allergy meds with you before you arrive, rather than having to seek out a pharmacy and see. Thinking about heat and mosquitoes is the rest of the stuff here. You'll want to have a mosquito net that you can put on your bed. You also may want to bring a hat and get really hot, as well as sunglasses. And finally, having some mosquito spray or mosquito coils can be really, really helpful just to fend off mosquitoes throughout your trip.